Okay, welcome along once again. I'd like to introduce myself very briefly. My name's Kath Curd and I'm the Communications and Membership Officer at Community Energy Scotland. My colleague Peter here will be taking you through some of our organisational experience of low carbon heat projects. I can see that we've got some of our colleagues from the Carbon Neutral Islands project that we're currently working on, and I know that they will be sharing their own learning with the communities that they're working with, and I believe we may have some people from those communities as well. So welcome everybody, and welcome everybody even if you're not from any of those areas I've just mentioned. It's early days for Community Energy Scotland in terms of low carbon heat experience. It's early days generally for certainly at a community level for low carbon heat technology and knowledge. We have got experience here at Community Energy Scotland in experimental projects, and the experience there lies in sourcing, overseeing installations and maintenance of domestic systems and identifying challenges and lessons learned. And as I said, these are things that Peter will be looking at shortly. As we gain more knowledge and experience in the field, we will look to share that further potentially with similar events. So please keep an eye out for messages on social media and certainly on our website for any of those if you're interested in future. There will be opportunities to participate and discuss parts of Peter's presentation as we go along. So depending on how that goes, we can keep the Q&As as flexible as possible. If we find that we're staggering too much, we may then draw that back and have the question and answer session at the end. I can see there's a few of us here, so it might we'll gauge that as we go along as to how best that will be. Please put your hand up when you would like to either ask a question or contribute to a discussion. You can also put questions in the chat. I will be looking through that as we go along. If there's anything that we're not able to answer today, then please do contact me directly with your question or your query, and I will make sure that I speak to the relevant colleagues or any of our other peers to try and get the best answers possible for you. I will put my email address in the chat shortly. There will be other links that I'll add to the chat during the course of the next hour for other organisations to help signpost you for further information, and also to provide links for funding opportunities. One thing I will note for those not familiar with CES's role with community members, one thing we are not is a funding organisation. So we don't actually provide funding for projects ourselves, but we work with communities in possibly sourcing funding, and it's possible for us to work on every other stage of a given project. So just wanted to make that clear. We'd like to very briefly, for those who are happy to do so, find out who you are, where you're from, and a very brief description of your interest in today's webinar. So if we can maybe take the next 2 or 3 minutes just to do that very, very quickly. I'll choose somebody first, and then if the person can then choose somebody else to pass on to, we'll get through like that. But please pass on it if you're not happy to share that information. Okay, we'll start with Carola.
Hello. I live at the north end of the Isle of Lewis. I've been involved in community energy for quite a long time, and I have an interest in decarbonisation of heat for the community here. I'll pass on to Ken Gordon.
Sorry, I had to wake up quickly there. Thanks, Carol. I'm Ken Gordon from Zero Carbon Daviate, and we're a community organisation that's been supported by Community Energy Scotland for some time now. In fact, they helped us start. We are looking at various things in the environment, in particular retrofit as well as low carbon heating. And we are involved as individual members now in a project that Aberdeenshire has initiated to look at retrofitting community buildings throughout Aberdeenshire. And one of the first things we had to do as part of that project was identify all the community buildings, because there is no list. So it's quite an interesting area. But of course, it then ties in, once we've done the retrofit, with low carbon heating, and we're looking at ground source for each and every one of those. Cool.
Thanks, Ken. Maybe Stephen Kelly next. You're on mute, Stephen.
Good morning, everyone. Can you see me now?
Yes.
So my name is Stephen Kelly, and I live in Bewley.
Sorry,
And
Stephen.
just,
Sorry to interrupt
pretty
you.
much an interested.
Could you maybe switch your camera off, Stephen, so that we can hear you?
Yes, I
properly?
think that's what it is. I'm
Okay,
getting
good.
a message saying that my internet.
Thank you.
I hope that's a bit better. I was getting a message saying that my internet connection was unstable.
Thank you.
So hopefully this is a bit better. I'm just an interested member of the public, actually, I suppose you would describe me as, but with a long-standing interest in renewable energy. And I'm actually thinking of I'm looking into at the moment the viability of a heat pump for my home. So, but I'm interested in general community energy schemes, and I've kept an eye and a general interest in it for years, basically. Thank
Lovely.
you.
Thank you, Stephen. I think we've got quite a few people here, so we might try and whiz through you all fairly quickly if we can. Maybe Ruben next. I recognise your name. Would you like to introduce yourself briefly, please?
Hi, CNI now, community development officer.
Sorry, Ruben, to interrupt you. I'm going to have to stop you there. We've got a very bad signal or bad Wi-Fi connection, and we can't really understand you. Maybe we can come back to you if that's all right. I'm going to go to Mia next.
No problem.
Mia?
Hi, everybody. I'm Mia. I'm a master's student studying renewable energy, net zero transition with the UHI up in Thurso, but I live in Stirling, so I'm just here to listen and learn. Thank you for letting me be a part of this.
Thanks, Mia. Aisling?
Yeah, so like Ruben, I'm the Community Development Officer for the Carbon Neutral Islands project, and I represent Hoy and Walls in Orkney.
Thanks for coming along. Good to see you, Aisling. Rosie?
Yeah, I am the Community Development Officer for RASI for the Carbon Neutral Islands project, and I've got a really big interest in domestic energy.
Great, thanks, Rosie. And Iona?
Hello, I work for Local Energy Scotland. We deliver the Scottish Government's Community and Renewable Energy Scheme, that's CARES. Part of that has the Let's Do Net Zero Community Buildings funding. And we've also got a new programme, the Community Heat Development Programme, and that's to support feasibility studies in collaborative heating projects from groups of householders or communities. Thanks for having me.
Great to see you, Iona. Thanks for coming along. Matthew?
Hi, I'm Matthew Logan. I'm a development officer with Community Energy Scotland in the Western Isles. So yeah, just interested to hear from colleagues about how they've been getting on, and interested in how low carbon heat can be applied in the Western Isles as well.
Good stuff. Thanks, Matthew. Kevin?
Yeah, good morning all. I'm a open university student, a very mature open university student, doing my final year project on low carbon heating, the title being a systematic modeling process for assessing the potential for community district heating networks based on ambient temperature heat networks. So I am really just here to find out information. I am also trying to get ground source into my own property, although it's proving much harder than I thought it would be.
Thanks, Kevin. Good to see you. And Kieran?
Hi there, I'm the Community Development Operations Manager for Sandy Development Trust on the island of Sandy up in Orkney. I'm also a director with the Scottish Islands Federation and also a island ambassador with Island Innovation. So this kind of ticks all three boxes. I'm very interested in, as many others, about net zero transition and yeah, renewable energy. So yeah, very interested to listen and learn. Thank you.
Good to see you, Kieran. Thank you. Ruben, can we speak to you, or can you speak to us any better now? Do we have Ruben? Doesn't sound like it. Okay, we'll move on, and hopefully Ruben will be able to at least hear what's going on, if nothing else. Right, without any further ado, thank you all for your introductions. Interested to hear where you're from and what your interests are today. I'm going to pass you on now to my colleague Peter Long, one of the project managers at Community Energy Scotland, who will take you through some of his knowledge sharing. Over to you, Peter.
Thank you very much, Kath. And yeah, thank you very much for all your introductions. That was really interesting, and hopefully I can do you all justice. We should probably test this for Kath. It doesn't look like I can share my screen. But yeah, just while we're sorting that out, yeah, so I'm a project manager based up in Orkney. I've worked for CES for the last 5 years. So you'll have to, and sorry, I'm based up in Orkney. My work, the projects I've helped deliver over those 5 years are based in Orkney. So hopefully you'll excuse my island-centric, Orkney-centric project experience I want to walk through, but it kind of represents a timeline of our experience and where we are today and where we want to get to. Thanks, Kath. Great. So yeah, what we're going to go through is just a bit of a bit of our low carbon heat. But yes, I do, even though our time is fairly restricted this morning, I do want to emphasize that I would love to have follow-up conversations after this, because this is in part, we acknowledge that we're still on a journey ourselves, and there's not a one-size-fits-all solution for every property, especially with my own experience in Orkney is different from somebody in the Central Belt when it comes to decarbonising solutions. Yep, so that's me, obviously. Yeah, project manager up at Community Energy Scotland. If you ever want to contact me, my details are on our website, or you can contact me via Kath as well, and she circulates her contact details. So the first one I want to speak about is the Heat Smart Orkney project that was through Scottish Government funding. And what this was trying to do was ease grid constraints locally in Orkney, in a certain area of Orkney, by pairing renewable generation with domestic heating, but secondary heating. So we weren't making any impacts to the property's primary heating. This was very much de-risked what we were doing, because we were like pushing innovation rather than there's a single property, it wants to decarbonize. That was an aspect of the project, but the overall goal was push innovation to keep a 900 kilowatt community-owned wind turbine turning, and at the same time try and funnel that energy into local properties and have a semi-circular economy and have as much revenue stay within the community as possible. So this was upgrading people's hot water cylinders to high efficient mega flow cylinders and putting in dimplex quantum high retention storage heaters as their secondary heating. So we could charge these, and then the idea being that then the property's primary heating system didn't need to work so much. But since we were forcing these electrical resistive loads to turn on, the participants were compensated for those funds, the electricity forced into the property, but also rebated by first 10% and then up to 20%. Yeah, so the area that I was mentioning is part of Orkney's active network management system, which was implemented in 2009 to allow more renewable energy to be connected to a very constrained grid. And when there's not enough space on the grid, certain turbines in certain areas start getting turned off. So we could intercept those signalings, those control signalings, to start turning turbines off and turn on electrical devices at that time. The project suffered from like internet connections. You need a very good, reliable internet connection to have like optimum availability. So I would say that was one of the issues. Another one was the equipment used to send control signals to each of our 70-odd properties was relatively new, bespoke equipment that had its own reliability issues, but there was certainly enough successful operation to prove the business model. But what I would say about the Heat Smart Orkney project, even though I would class it as a success, it ran for 2 years unfunded, but it was only possible through very generous capital funding from the Scottish government. So it would be hard to replicate, and you could argue that it's quite a niche thing for Orkney specific problems, but with grid constraints. But I do feel there's potential for it to be rolled out in the future when communications equipment and internet can be more reliable, and it's something that can be, aspects of it is certainly replicable in other areas where when we start seeing more constrained areas in the grid across the country. I'd say I do hope this model does we do manage to set this back up again in Orkney in the future. I think it had great potential and serviced the community groups we were working with quite well. Oh yes, I've already gone through some of the lessons learned, but one of the links that Kath's going to forward on to everybody is the final report of the project, and that's already available. If you just look up Heat Smart Orkney final report, you'll find it very quickly, and that provides a good explanation of the background behind the project, the rollout of the project, and the results and the lessons learned. So I would recommend, if you have any interest in similar community energy projects, it was definitely be worth a read. So the Heat Smart Orkney project was kind of fed into the SMILE project, and this was European funding. This time we worked with a large number of European partners to look at technical and non-technical innovation barriers, solutions. But here we were building upon the Heat Smart Orkney project that I just described, where Heat Smart Orkney was looking at relatively simple resistive heating, where SMILE was trying to incorporate wet heating systems. So air source heat pumps, were our primary source of heating and hot water. And this was certainly like a large learning curve locally for us at CES. So I don't want to get too technical, and Kath tried her best to remind me that I need to make. I shouldn't be assuming too much about everybody's technical experience, and I'm certainly no engine plumber or electrician. So, but here I've just put in some pictures from some of the equipment that we installed, and so we used the Daikin high temperature thermal heat pump. Because we unfortunately our technical partners had to pick a heat pump, and that's the heat pump we're integrating with. They only had time and resource to onboard a single model, so it did restrict some of our flexibility in the properties that we could enroll into the project, as the heat pumps were rated 11, 14, and 16 kilowatts, where a lot of properties in Orkney, even as cold and windy as it is here, some of them may only need a 6 kilowatt heat pump, and it would have been irresponsible to have put in such an oversized heat pump. So it was a bit limiting. But yeah, we also installed lithium-ion batteries, again, new hot water cylinders, and also paired with SunAmp just outside Edinburgh with their phase change material heat batteries, which are kind of a success story for Scotland, bringing energy efficiencies and new phase change material heat batteries to the market, which do offer higher energy densities and higher efficiencies, lower heat loss. Yeah, so what we found at CES, we were project coordinators locally, but we were managing that face-to-face relationship with our 60 participants. And what we found is that, choose my words carefully, it was necessary for us to upskill to enable to help these properties transition from an oil-based heating system to a heat pump-based energy system. And our contractors who won the contract to fit all the equipment, they did a fantastic job, but I would say they were still upskilling to help homeowners transition, make that switch from oil to electricity, and how to commission heat pumps and how to problem solve. So this was certainly a large impetus for CES to try and upskill quickly. And a lot of our learnings came from problem solving there. But yeah, lots of successes. But again, some of the lessons learned from the project were, again, just the role of internet, and just how you when you're working in high resolution data, down to like secondly resolution data, having your internet down for half a day can make big impacts in terms of data collection, and being able to send control signalings to the property to try and turn on these electrical appliances to ease the local grid. But yeah, I would say we underestimated how much time and resources was required just on the activity of helping these homeowners transition to a heat pump based heating system, just in part down to the changing in their bills, and also how to use the heat pumps differently. This was a very the project did rely on a high level of disruption for the homeowner. We were putting a lot of equipment into the property, and the idea being that we were retrofitting this innovative set up into multiple like standard houses, but you can never be sure how that system was going to interact with that property's existing system. And sometimes when you were doing this, you identified a fault in the system's heating circuit, or circulating pumps, or thermostats, and it did grey the area. What was the responsibility of the project and what was the responsibility of the homeowner? And we certainly did our very best to support as much as possible, but that was an aspect I would say we probably weren't prepared for enough, is to be able to and be comfortable with drawing that line more clearly, because we realized we were coming with a competitive offer of a free heat pump, but at the same point you're introducing a lot of a disruption to the homeowner. We want to be as sympathetic to that as possible. Some of the other aspects that we did find complex is because we were coming with such a innovative project that some of our participants had a tendency to misinterpret the scope of the project and what we were able to do. And you see this quite a lot, even in the discussion of, in a standard installation of a heat pump, you are introducing a lot of change, and you have to hit the balance of, sorry, motion sensitive lights here, hit the balance of provide enough information so the homeowner can take control of their heating system enough, but not overload them. And then there's a risk of them effectively forgetting the whole thing. So yeah, there was a balance there that we walked as best as we could with our contractors. They did a great job, but I think they don't work in the innovation space. They know how to install heat pumps, hot water cylinders, batteries, and then so we had to work with them when it came to the innovation side. But yeah, it was, as I said, the contractors, RS Merriman's, based in Stromness here in Orkney. They do put a lot of emphasis in care, and that did support the project a lot and allowed us to do what we needed to do on our data sides. But yeah, I would say, and I'm sure like there's plenty of people in this room that attest the same thing, that then your contractor can make a big difference to your experience. And this is going to be a regional consideration, don't say problem, consideration. Like in some areas, you might not have the luxury of choice. And I think that's going to be a problem in order to meet Scottish Government targets for the rollout of low carbon heating. And they do have a large funding for upskilling. But I think the way the last 3 years have gone, I think the sector is struggling. And that's something that we did find, that there's not enough contractors. There's always going to be the need for more contractors that are skilled enough for a good, efficient heat pump system designed, commissioned, and supported. And it's our experience that there's room for improvement. Yeah, the other lessons learned, and I guess significant problem for implementing a project like SMILE, is that it focused on storage in order to be able to implement some of the activities, and then who pays for that. Again, Kath's going to send on links for the final reports for that, and I would say there's lots of really helpful data in that, and all these lessons learned are reported in detail within the report.
Thank you, Peter. Before you go on, could I just ask, there's a couple of people asking some questions relevant to what you've just been saying. And that is the performance of the air source heat pumps in not only this far north in Orkney, but also how do they survive in a marine environment, please?
Oh, great. Okay, thanks. Yeah, I should have said that. I can't. Yeah, thank you for interjecting there. So in terms of the performance, we didn't have any problems with the performance of any of these heat pumps. As I said, they were rated quite high for heat pumps, and they are the high temperature models, so that they are capable of delivering like 80-degree water, even though the efficiency does drop noticeably after like 60-65 degrees. So you don't want to be certainly setting your heat pump that high, but where it was required, it was certainly capable of it. Most of our heat pumps were set at a flow temperature of like 50-55 degrees. I think some maybe at 60, and so they were certainly capable of keeping the homes warm, and at that power rating they were able to do it quickly. The only problems we did find with some of our solutions is where we've introduced a significant amount of energy storage in the central heating loop, there could be a large there were some scenarios where the conflict between hot water priority was taking too long, that then the house is starting to get cold. So this was we just had to do a lot of having that discussions with the homeowners of when to program when their hot water is being charged and when their house is being heated. But yeah, the heat pumps we didn't have any problems with. The project ended 2021, and most of those heat pumps had been in operation for 2 years as part of the project. Upon recommendation, all those heat pumps were sent to a third party to get BlyGold coated. So they're all stamped with their certificate. So within that 2 year, we saw no deterioration of the heat pumps itself, but I acknowledge that 2 years isn't a very long time to monitor that, but there was no sign of rust. I would say that one of our heat pumps right at the end of the project got critically damaged as a result of a storm, and I think it was just a case that a bolt, one of the panels of the heat pump, its securing bolts sheared, came off, and then just the inside of the heat pump got essentially flooded by rain. So it was just critically damaged. So that was, there wasn't enough evidence available to say what was the cause of it, whether it was manufacturer fault or installer fault, or it was just a bad bolt. But that was the only one we ever had a problem with. So I'd say it was pretty good. We haven't had any reports since of any of the heat pumps failing.
Could I just check, Peter, to double check with you? Somebody has also asked about the seasonal coefficient of performance. Is that information found in the reports in detail?
Unfortunately, this is probably one of the lessons learned too late in the project, is that this unfortunately wasn't a primary focus for the project, and the Daikin Altherma high temperature model doesn't track that as standard. It was unfortunate timing. Like if this project had happened even a year later, we could have used the Altherma 3 if we'd stuck with Daikin, and that does become a standard or be able to report that data. So we were tracking more the flow and return temperature and the power consumption and the trends in the feed. So you could see when the heat pumps were short cycling, for example, and we could take action upon that. But the Altherma high temperature, sorry, the heat pump model we were using doesn't monitor flow rate, and it wasn't considered at the time to fit a flow meter. So this was part of the learnings why we felt the Heat Pump Plus project was a way to build upon that learning. So that's what we've been trying to do in this latter project. So yeah, a rambling answer that we didn't get to the point of being able to successfully track coefficient of performance.
Peter, just to let you know, we are on 22:12, and it would be good to have 10 minutes at the end to give anybody a chance for further discussion. So just to keep you on track, because I know it's hard to watch the clock at the same time as the
Thank you. I would just, yeah, so I'll just quickly talk about the ReFLEX project, which is one that CES came into to help to work with the local communities that we work with, and also bring in some of our learnings from Heat Smart Orkney and SMILE. Unfortunately, there wasn't a heating offer during the project due to some regulatory issues. But this was trying to build upon those learnings, but tie it to the market and find a way that a property could get low carbon heating offers that didn't require large capital funding, like have the homeowner have access to low carbon heat, low carbon power, low carbon transport, and effectively pay it off over a 5-year period. Sorry. And it was the barriers that allowed that 5-year tie-in, that was the problems. But they're still working on this, and we hope that there will be something later this year, because the main thing is just making sure that anybody who wants to can have access to these transitional technologies. And Home Energy Scotland, for example, are doing a great job with their funding. But yeah, ReFLEX is a project that set up a company, and that company is trying to do it without funding. So yeah, hopefully we'll see some progress in that. Unfortunately, there's no publicly available reports just yet, but the project is ending relatively soon, and we hope that publicly available reports will be available with the plethora of learnings. But if anybody on this webinar is going to be at All Energy or any of the fully charged events this year, ReFLEX Orkney will be available for discussions and presentations. So yeah, just I've already mentioned some of the learnings that have brought us to the Heat Pump Plus project. It's a modestly sized project in comparison to the previous projects. It's funded by Energy for Tomorrow, which is a part of the Centrica Group. That what we were hoping to do is really nail down into the energy efficiency per property, where our previous projects were looking at focusing on how demand side, like load controlled heating and hot water in properties, can ease the grid. So that was the focus of those projects, even though there was secondary focuses on making sure the homeowners were as supported as well as possible. But Heat Smart Orkney is not looking at innovation. We're just trying to get back to our bread and butter of supporting individuals. So yeah, so here what we were trying to do is look at power monitoring, temperature monitoring, heat from heat pumps, and really nail down into what it takes to make heat pumps as efficient as possible. And at the end of the project, we want to hopefully be able to produce not a Bible, but a document that is shareable, publicly available, that is just our findings on what it takes to make heat pumps as efficient as possible for homeowners or building managers, community groups. So yeah, our project started at the end of 2021, and since then we've onboarded, we've had roughly 80 properties approach us for assistance, and we've got energy monitoring in roughly 40 of those, a different suite of monitors. So we've tried to make those monitors as cost effective as possible. We don't want to like do this work with high, like expensive equipment that's just unfeasible for any homeowner to take on themselves after as a replication activity. Once we have the initial talk with our participants, we also ask them to complete a series of questions that's trying to gauge their perception of their heat pump, and the idea that the amount of faith you have in your heat pump is in part an emotional relationship you have with your heat pump, and this could be based in the amount of understanding you have in your heat pump. I'll touch on that a little bit later. But since the launch of the project, Nesta, Hildebrand, and the Sustainable Energy Authority of Ireland have all approached us and to discuss like knowledge sharing, lessons learned, where we could complement each other. So that was quite exciting. And what we found out, there is a lot of organizations working in the space, and some people are already on this in this meeting today are also working in this space. And I do hope we're not stepping on each other's toes or reinventing the wheel too many times. But yeah, so what I'll just, sorry if I'm going a bit rambling now, just trying to fit everything in. But in some of our initial questionnaires, we did ask people like, what heat pump do you have, the manufacturer, for example, and even we were surprised just how many, even in Orkney, in our 80 participants, just the amount of different heat pumps there are. And that did give us an insight of how difficult this project is going to be able to provide advice on this suite of heat pumps. And there's just not the ability to go through the manuals of so many models. So as much as we can be able to provide that one-to-one relationship, but also find generic steps that anybody could take. And the pie charts on the bottom were trying to fill in our knowledge of, well, what data do people have available before we came along? Can they see how much power their heat pump's using? Can they see what heat is the heat pump producing? And yeah, there's a lot of gaps there, and I guess that's the reason why these people are approaching us, because they don't currently have access to the data themselves. So I guess it's just a question to the group. Is not a mandatory question, but yeah, feel free to type in an answer or raise your hand. If you have a heat pump, do you feel you have access to enough data from it to operate it at its highest efficiency? And from the data that we've got from our participants, generally the answer is no.
Peter, while folk are having a think about that and possibly typing any information into the chat, we've got a question from Kevin asking about, just to go back a couple of steps to the finished projects, with whether we know what happened overall with people's energy bills, and asking whether they dropped due to spending less on oil and not using as much electricity. Yeah,
so I would say on average we reached cost parity. There was some where they noticed a energy saving, and then there was some where they experienced a cost increase. I would say I think we thought it was always going to be hard to compete with oil, but then we got half of our installations done before the lockdown happened, and the other half afterwards. And I think it was rough. During some of that period, the price of oil dropped significantly. It did waver quite a lot. then we did do a question at the end of the project and asked people if they felt they had experienced a cost increase or decrease or the same, and the majority said it was the same, and nearly every participant said the heat pump met their requirements, like heat requirements. I would say it would have been nice to have had more resources available to nail down into some of the soft sciences of how people were using the heat pump. You could see some of this by the power trends, like whether they're keeping the heat pump on all day or just periods. But yeah, I would say very few properties had a noticeable decrease in their bills.
Okay, thanks for that, Peter. We've got another question. It's not directly related to your question on the screen, but Ken is asking what was the split between ground source heat pumps and air source?
Well, in our previous project, that was just looking at air to water heat pumps, but in the Heat Pump Plus project, we were expecting only air to water heat pumps would approach us, but I think roughly a quarter of the people that did approach us, a fifth to a quarter, were ground source heat, and we've got monitoring in a number of ground source heat properties, and generally when you speak to them, they are very happy with it. The majority of heat pumps in Orkney are air to water, and if you do have ground source heat, you've probably had that since 2010 to 2012, when there was a big push at that time. But I think there haven't been any new ground source heat pumps in the last 8 years, more or less. Sorry, I've forgotten who mentioned it, but they're about the problems with trying to get ground source heat pump installed, and I think that's the case here. And ReFLEX is hoping to be able to facilitate the organisation of getting the kit to Orkney to get that done.
Okay, thanks, Peter. Ken, I don't know if you want to speak to Peter directly about your ground source, which you've mentioned in the chat. I'm happy to pass the question on, but I thought it might be more useful to you if you could speak to him direct, maybe.
Yeah, that's fine. Sorry, it was just an answer to the question, really. A heat pump, do you feel you can access enough data from it to operate it at its highest level? Well, I can get all the data out of mine that I need, but I don't need it to control it. It just does it itself. You know, it's the heat pump controls, it speaks to each room. It has a thermostat in each room, and it turns on the underfloor heating as and when required. And it's just astonishing, you know, to get a coefficient of performance of a seasonal coefficient of performance, or seasonal performance factor, as we prefer to call it nowadays, because there's no fiddle factors in there. It just is what it says on the tin, you know. And I think it really would be very interesting for your next project if you could, you know, look at this, because that is the basis of what people are having to pay, is how efficient their systems are going to be. And, you know, certainly outside the meeting, if you want to have a chat about this, I'm also a council member of the Ground Source Heat Pump Association, so yeah, I have a vested interest in putting the case for ground source, because it's much overlooked. And the curious case is that a ground source heat pump is actually less than an air source, because there's no fans or moving parts or anything. But you need the ground, so you need to drill a hole. But the hole I drilled in my back garden isn't there just for me. It's there for my kids, my grandkids, and for everybody. It's there forever, you know. And you know, this is a resource that that we should really be looking at over a long period of time and covering that way. But anyway,
yeah, that's a good point. Well, thank you. Yeah, definitely will reach out after this. It'd be great to have a conversation.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. Up in Orkney next month, and no, month after next, so maybe catch up.
Well, that'd be good. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I'll just pass on from this, and then this is just some of the other responses we put out. Yeah, so this is like, how would you rate knowledge and understanding of how to operate the heat pump? I would say most were middle to less understanding. The heat pump system meets my heating needs. Yeah, I would say the majority average or positive by a long degree. So the heat pumps are proven to be very, very effective. Perception of running costs, mixed bag there, but this is perception. And what the project is trying to do is to give people access to the data. So we'll see how that goes at the end of the project. We'll ask them the same questions. And then in terms of the handover that people had from their installers, yeah, I would say the majority average to good handover, and then some feeling that they were not provided the handover. I'll just pass this, and this is just some of the monitoring equipment we are using. So we've got some temperature data loggers, which just log the temperature every 30 minutes. They're very cost effective, so you can have one spaced around the room, around the property. The only disadvantage is you have to physically recover the units to get the data. The power monitoring equipment we've used for the last 4 or 5 years is the effigy based equipment, and it's very good cost effective stuff. But the problem we have is that effigy appear to be leaving the market, and there's not much in the way of replacements. So since we don't really have much time for much more details of this, if you could follow up with any of your understanding of other possible CT clamp-based energy monitors, we'd be very interested to hear your experience while we're still investigating alternatives. And then, yes, as is mentioned of the shortcomings of the SMILE project, we've put in a number of heat meters to actually get that flow rate and flow and return temperature in order to map the coefficient of performance and try and take impacts to increase it. So yeah, some of the lessons learned is very much, as you can imagine, there's still a lot of confusion and myths out there about heat pumps. There's a lot of people out there that don't have access to the data they need to keep an eye on their heat pumps. And heat pumps and backup heaters and immersion elements can very much be vampire loads, that they could be very invisible and you might not be aware of what they're doing. And that will change with the more modern heat pumps, but we hope to be able to make that data a lot more available. And it's quite interesting, the assumptions homeowners are making, and then you show them the data and how their assumptions are incorrect. But is the first step. And yeah, and I would say yes, there's still little readily available guidance out there of how to change the settings of your heat pump and what to change them to. So we hope to be able to do something about that by the end of the project. I'll maybe just, I did want to put in some quick guides of like some of the stuff that we found in terms of heat pump guidance and troubleshooting kind of things. But yeah, very conscious of the times. I can't really afford to go through a lot of these. But yeah, it will be part of the recording. It will be part of our outputs. And if you have the capacity, maybe just take a screenshot. But and also happy to follow up after this with any conversations. And
I'm sorry, Peter, just a reminder to people, the slides will be available if people email me. My email is at the top of the chat. Then we can send a file of the slides. Sorry to interrupt.
No, sorry. And then I just wanted to follow up with just, I would recommend, I mean, this is more in the domestic setting. If you have any interest in making changes to your property or people in your community that you represent, Warmworks and Home Energy Scotland are definitely a must. And they effectively operate as like a one-stop shop. And they offer great support, and we have great ties with them locally, and they help feed into our our projects. And yeah, so I did want to just say that we are still continuing our journey in the low carbon heating space, and we've got a number of projects coming up that are going to feed into Heat Pump Plus and also learn from Heat Pump Plus. And it'll all just help us provide a better service, and that's what we want to get to. Thank you very much. Sorry, that was a bit rushed.
That's all right, Peter. We're on 12 o'clock now, so I understand if anybody does need to go, if you have other meetings or other commitments, then that's absolutely fine. But this will be recorded, so you will be able to see the rest of the meeting or hear the rest of the meeting. Does anybody else have any questions? Whilst you're thinking, there is one that I will go back to from Ruben. And then we'll have any further questions over the next couple of minutes. Ruben was asking if you felt, Peter, that anybody in any of those projects felt that their home was warmer or better heated.
I mean, the one comes to mind. They had a very nice, a very modern insulated home, but they'd taken the choice to have an electric flow boiler. So it was quite expensive to heat their home. So we could just fit them with a heat pump, and that immediately decreased the bills. And they were very impressed with the capacity of the heat pump to heat the house quickly. And then some of it was very interesting how the lowering the carbon footprint wasn't the main factor why people joined those projects. There was a property, an elderly couple who were more than happy with oil, but it was getting harder and harder to fill their oil tank because it required them to physically carry the oil containers to their tank and top up their 1,000-litre tank themselves because the truck couldn't get down the road. But now it was becoming impractical. So they were definitely converted. Like, they would have happy to stay in oil, but when they saw how easy it is to heat your home with a heat pump in relation to having an oil tank topped up, that was another one of the properties that comes to mind. It is just a simpler process. In terms of quality of heat, I'm struggling to think of homes that noticeably comment about the quality of heat. I mean, some of the properties as part of the system design, the calculations that our contractors had to do said that certain heat radiators in rooms needed to be upgraded as well. So there was in part their heat was better because we upgraded their heating system rather than just introducing a heat pump. So yeah, the quality of heat would have improved there, kind of due to those aspects as well.
Okay, thanks, Peter. Ruben, I hope that helps answer that question, and I hope that we've been able to adequately answer the questions that have come up. I don't see any other hands up, and I don't see anything else in the chat. So I think we can wrap up for now. Thank you ever so much for coming along. I'm sorry we run over time just very slightly. I hope everybody's managed to get something from Peter's presentation and the information that we've shared today. As I've said, and as Peter has said, any questions, any further questions, any queries, please get in touch. Peter's information is on the website, as is mine, but my email address is also at the top of the chat if you want to just copy that today. And I will take this opportunity now to thank Peter as well for taking the time to present this and putting the information together to share with us all. And we will hopefully see you again at other webinars. As I said, please get in touch with any more low carbon heat queries. Thank you very much.
Thank you.